Oftentimes, entrepreneurs, myself included, we over index on the emotion of creation instead of the opportunities to solve problems. For me, the number one mistake I've made for 7 years now, and it's just now beginning to shift for me, is prioritizing problem definition.
Design is often thought of as just how something looks, but in reality, it's a way of solving problems. When you can clearly define a problem, you're already halfway to the solution. In today's episode, I sit down with Adedolapo Olisa, a lead engineer at Cox Automotive and the CEO and technical lead at Charisol. We talked about how he made his way into tech and how he started Charisol, and why talking to users is key to success. We also dived into the critical role design plays in DevOps and what it takes to tackle problems head on. Let's get started. Dolapo, thank you for joining me on the very first episode of the Lead Design Build podcast. I have nothing short of gratitude that you're the first person to grace the show. You gave me my first job in tech, quite literally gave me my first check, basically support an idea that I'm working on, and I'm super excited to share that later on the show. It's wonderful that I can reach out when I need something, and thank you, and once again, welcome.
Hey Raymond, it's good to be here. Always a pleasure talking to you. I think very highly of you, and looking forward to digging in.
I'm going to start with an icebreaker question. What's a random talent that you have that most people don't know about?
Random talent. Let's see. The ones that come to mind are they're more self deprecation. I love playing soccer. If you know me well, then it's not a secret. It's not something that's like publicly out there. I love playing soccer. I played soccer all through secondary school. I played in college. In college, I actually won. We had something called Turkey Bowl. So in the the US here, there's a game, the popular game Super Bowl, which is like American football. But Turkey Bowl is kind of like the big game in my college for soccer because it's like think of fraternities coming together for like playing a competition up for like the season. Um, but yeah, I was both the player and the coach this season we won, which was fun. It's I used to call it my first love. Yeah, so I love soccer. I play generally once a week.
So you've been in design and tech for see what like almost over a decade maybe. What's your origin story and how did you get into tech?
It's kind of crazy when you say it that way that I've been in tech for over a decade. It, it's actually crazy to think about that. But yeah, I finished college 2013. Oh, actually 2012 December. I studied mechanical engineering. When I got done, so there was a recession in 2009, but by 2012 it was still very much like a struggling economy. Like all through college, I wasn't able to work because all the jobs on campus were taken by Americans. Anyway, so I got done and I couldn't get a job. I went through interviews with like Chrysler, Ford, all the big automotive companies in like Michigan. I would get to the last stage, it just becomes crickets. So as an international student, you have to get a job, I think, in 3 months at the time. If not, you have to go back home. The whole time I kept getting recruited by like a month before my deadline. I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna give one of these guys a shot. So there's a there's a consulting company that was based in Northern California. They were like, hey, we're gonna pay for your accommodation. You're just gonna fly yourself out here and pay for your food. So I was like, you know what? That's better than whatever it is that I'm doing. So I went there. I did the training for like 2 months or so. Pretty much now those kinds of training are called boot camp. But at the time it was not like
Hmm.
a recognized or formal thing. Yeah, so I did that. Got a few interviews. I was trained as both a business analyst and a quality analyst. So no engineering training or anything like that. Even though we did learn about like databases and things like that, but it was more from a business analysis and quality testing perspective. I did the training and applied for a role as a quality analyst at KBB, which is funny. I'm actually wearing one of the shirts unintentionally.
Mhm.
And so got a job with them. I was doing QA for about 7 months. So that's how I got into tech. The story gets more interesting, but
That's interesting. And that job at KBB led to the job where you're at now at Cox, right?
yes. So I got in as a QA. So the funny thing is there were two of us that went for to apply for a job at KBB. One of the other guys, who's still my friend, his name is Nakul. Like literally, that's his name. He actually got the job. The job we both went for, he got the job. And I remember thinking I killed the interview. Like I thought I was really good. Like I answered all your questions. I felt confident and all that, but they didn't pick me. Turns out there was another project that got funded very quickly, needed to get done like urgently. They did not even have time to go back through and interview like a new set of people. So they just literally reached out and just plucked me from, hey, we talked to you. Are you still available? If you are, we got a job for you.
Yeah, well, obviously, I thought you did very well in the interview. What was your experience like in that first job?
So I got in very unideal circumstances. Like the job, typically a Scrum team then was about four engineers to two QAs. The ratio they usually like to keep then was about one QA person to one to two engineers. But the team I was on, we had 4 or 5 engineers, and I was the only QA. And we were working on one of the most public changing projects. So what KBB did is they help you evaluate how much to pay for a car. So before they would give like maybe values. For good, they'll tell you how much a good car is worth. For bad, they'll tell you, and on the same vehicle. The project I came in for changed it from being a point value, meaning instead of for good, you only have one value. They changed it to a range. So pretty much tell you, well, if you're paying from this amount to this amount, it's good. If you're paying from this amount to this amount, it's bad deal. Or there was a lot of visual work, and like imagine like a mini graph. So the graph kind of became the symbol of the company, and I was on that project that developed that graph and the logic on how it shows. So it was very big project, but it was kind of understaffed, and it was rushed, and I was doing my first like QA gig, first role in tech and everything.
That's actually very interesting. When I look back at my experience too, I see a very interesting pattern as to how your early years in tech determines how far you go in a way. But tell me about, because that's a QA role, tell me about how that has now grown into seeing a broader life cycle development of the products at Cox and yeah, maybe at KBB at the time.
After about 7 months, once the project went live and everything went well, a lot of people were kind of surprised at how well it went, because it was the project that everyone knew was important, but it was kind of like, we think you guys spun up a new team for this type feeling. But it went well, and then I developed a relationship with one of the key personnel. So the role is now called DevOps, but back then it was called build release engineering. It was like not a popular role. I remember I would just come in every day and I would just see this guy. Yeah, his name was Richard, and Richard would come in whenever he wants. He would leave whenever he wants. Everybody comes into the office, right? Like this is when everyone's coming into the office. You're dressed, the meeting starts at this time and whatever. Richard comes in at 7, leaves at 4. Some days, he comes in and he just kind of sits in his cube. Everyone's meeting and whatever. He walks in whenever he wants. And I was like, man, what kind of role is that? Like, what do you do? So I picked it. It piqued my interest, and we became friends, and we would talk. So when he was leaving the company, um, his role was so critical because he was the guy that sat between what the devs were writing and releasing it to the production, so the infrastructure team. He sat in between, coordinating and making sure that all the changes that were done over a period of time made its way through, got tested and all that. So when he was leaving, the role needed to be filled, and it needed to be filled quickly. But nobody really liked that role because it's like super high visible. If you screw up, like we would have 2 deployments a week. Now we have like hundreds and thousands of deployments a week. But back then, you would only have 2. So if you miss the window, because it takes a whole testing cycle and all that. So if you imagine you go through all that and then you release code to production that's bad, like maybe it's off brand, or the color's wrong, or the logic is wrong, and whatever. The whole process to roll it back, and you've missed that window, you've missed revenue, and all these things. So it was very high profile role, and you needed a ton of expertise. So him leaving, and it was a 2 weeks notice, and there was no backup. The person that was supposed to back him up was scared to death about it. Was like, I do not want to be, like, I get heart sick when I have to do this thing. Like, I do not want to be. I'm not interested in the role and whatnot. So he recommended me and said, the only person I can think of that I know I can train in 2 weeks, that will put in the work to get to learn everything that needs to be learned in the period of time, to at least just run the program and just follow the steps, is Dolapo. So that's really how I started down the engineering path. So I would go to his house. I would go to his house to, like, pick his brain, to get a download. I was trying to get as much information from him as possible, like took notes and all this stuff. And so that pretty much was how I kind of started down the, like, engineering path.
Thank you for sharing, Delakbo. I also wanted to say that as an international student, it's still 3 months. Like, you have to get a job in 3 months or you leave back to your home country. But that aside, it's also interesting to see how that experience has shaped where you are now today, leading large teams like Cox and doing all this wonderful stuff. I was going to ask, what's the role of design in DevOps in terms of strategy?
When people ask me what are my core skills, my answer is usually problem definition. And it's always a strange response. And I'll tie it back to your question in a second. It's always a strange response because people don't even know what problem definition is. It's like, what is problem definition, and how can that be like a core skill? When you talk about design, for me, at the heart of design is problem definition. At the heart of design, because in tech, when we say design, usually people are thinking UI design or UX design, or whatever the case may be, right? But I studied mechanical engineering, like I said, and there is, in fact, my last project to defend my degree was design, like a part, right? So design is not just a tech term, it's an engineering term. It's really a human term. So for me, the skill of problem definition, which I often ascribe very closely to design, is the ability to go into a situation and first ask or figure out what is the problem. And the thing that's key to that is, oftentimes the problem is not what the boss says it is. The problem is not what your coworkers says it is. The problem is not even usually what the users say it is. The problem is a combination of all three. It's a combination of all the different perspective that's needed to truly understand and nail down the root cause. So when I talk of, like, the DevOps role or the build release engineer role, literally my job was, I come in every day. I did not have any tasks. I would go talk to people every day. I pretty much served engineers. So, like at the time, most engineers were focused on just like writing JavaScript, C Sharp, whatever the language to fix whatever the requirements are that was given to them. They generally did not know how that code they wrote made its way to production. They just knew if I create a branch or if I create whatever and I make my change and I, follow whatever instruction to integrate, I'm done. It gets handed off to QA and whatnot. The annoying, tedious, frustrating, high profile part of making sure that that actually made its way to production was what the DevOps person did. And for me, I would come in every day and the problem that I was dealing with was different. And more than just, so there was like the support part of things, which is somebody comes and they're like, hey, I'm struggling with XYZ, can you help me do ABC? There was that, right? Sometimes it's like, okay, just give them a documentation or whatever. And then there was the, hey, I keep listening to all these teams and all these teams are having this exact same problem and they're spending 2 hours of every day doing XYZ. And for me, that was my cue for, you know what, that might be an opportunity to try to understand, why are they doing this thing? Why is this task important? Why is this task taking so long? Is there opportunities to automate? And how can I, create like a software or an automation script that would do this thing for them? And obviously, you can imagine, right? Every day I would go in and maybe create my own small project to automate something that's taking all these developers 2 hours, 3 hours a day. And all of a sudden, it's now taking 5 minutes and they don't have to like sit down and actually do all the steps and babysit this thing. And it started giving them 2 hours back of their day, right? And so you become someone that they want to talk to, they want to pick your brain. How can you help them? And so for me, from a design perspective, that was my initiation into it. It was, you know, talking with the engineers, talking with the QA people, talking with them and really trying to understand, what's the problem? Why are you doing this? Is this something that's needed? And and oftentimes, like, the QA person would have maybe a perspective on the problem, and the engineer would have a different perspective on the problem. The boss would want it to be done a certain way, and it then becomes my job to like elicit and pull those requirements out and then repeat it back to every single one of them to see if they will sign off or they want to refine before I then go about and start design. And that's always kind of been in every role that I've had the same steps that I've consistently taken. What is the problem? And stating it in a way that you get the buy-in across all the different stakeholders, and also recognizing all the stakeholders that are involved before moving forward.
So I just learned something new. Part of design is problem solving. I have a master's degree in interaction design, and prior to getting that degree, I used to see design as just a visual tool. But now I know it's also a business tool, and it's also interesting to hear from your perspective that design is a technical tool. It's also a leadership tool to streamline processes, and manage teams. Let's quickly dive into Charisol. You've been leading Charisol for 8 years. When did you decide to become an entrepreneur?
Charisol is actually a marriage of two areas of inconvenience and frustration. I didn't set out to go into entrepreneurship. In fact, I still don't even think I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm being honest with you. Um, I feel like for me, Charisol started simply because my job had become vanilla in the sense that, they didn't want me like building new things or researching it. They just wanted me to expand the footprint of some of the processes I had developed. And I still wanted to like explore new things. And so I started Charisol as like you know what, all these ideas that I had. So there were two things. One was they were controlling my backlog, and then the second thing was I had all these ideas and input into how we could do things better, and even the product that we were building. I was kind of chiming in and like, hey guys, you might want to think about this, da, da, da. And the product people did not. It's like, who are you? You're a QA guy. That, just shut up. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And so I wanted to explore if my ideas on processes and product were valid, or if I was just ignorant as the feedback I was getting and things like that. So I started Charisol as like just to scratch my own itch, really. There was a friend of mine that she had like a coupon business. She had experience in like a coupon business, and then went into a different field. So she wanted to kind of go back and build her own coupon business because she understood that business well, even though she was no longer working in it. And I was like, hey, I would like to help you. So, funny story. Shout out to her. We came to an whatever agreement on let's work together. I was like doing it for free. I built the back end of the website in a weekend. And then she came and she was like, hey, I don't like the color of this thing. I want you to change it to this and then move this around. And it took me about a week so it took me like 2 days of weekend to like build out the whole back end and all this. And it took me about a week to kind of move the colors around and make it look the way she wanted it to look. And I was like, this is not gonna work. so so I decided, okay, I need to figure out how to do this more efficiently. And so that kind of led me to, okay, what does it look like to find people that are experts or have, are trained in whatever skill set I need to do a project, and what does it look like to like build a team. For me, when I started, this thing is not, I don't care if it makes money, it doesn't need to make money. I just want to learn. This is like my own MBA. And for me, the first moment that really changed and turned Charizard from like a plaything to a passion and a vision for my life, a purpose for my life. I was on a call with into a team at the time, and most of the team is based in Nigeria. And they were telling me how it's so hard to get a job outside of Nigeria because Nigerians were known to be scammers. We were known for like the Nigerian prince thing. So even though there was a lot of jobs going to like India and Eastern Europe, there was not enough engineering in the US, so they were open to like countries like that. Once they found people, however skilled they were, and they realized that they were Nigerians, it was a no-go area. And so for me, I was like, that's strange because I'm like, these guys are just as smart, just as good as people that I worked with. It makes no sense. Like for 10% of what you pay a a software engineer in the US, you can get like a Google trained or like the same level as a Google whatever in Nigeria because you're literally getting the best of the best in a 200 million population country, and you could get the very best from there. I kind of started making it my mission to go, how do I help bridge the gap, right? So that these talented people that I'm exposed to and I'm working with, how do I bridge the gap so that they can experience and connect to, job, opportunity, revenue for them, for their life, which is life changing type opportunity. So that kind of became one my first problem statement. So that you don't have one person trying to do everything because obviously they're gonna be slowing some, fasting some, and that's kind of where Charizard kind of started for me.
2 weekends ago, we had a conversation about Mildred, which is a sister company to Charisol, and how the team had ignored the results of a previous research as to like customers needing customer support. Can you speak about the importance of listening to customers in business?
Oftentimes, entrepreneurs, myself included, we over-index on the emotion of creation instead of the opportunities to solve problems. For me, the number one mistake I've made for 7 years now, and it's just now beginning to shift for me, is prioritizing problem definition. What does that mean? It means before touching the next feature, before touching the next idea, before touching the next concept, taking the time to break down what space are we operating in, what's the market that we are building for, who are the personas, who are those people, And beyond sitting and empathizing and trying to come up with like a brainstorming session, getting out of the building, so to speak, and finding those people and talking to them, presenting the problem as you understand it in order for them to either resonate with it or put real stories to it, giving them an opportunity to express what their struggles are, right? And then taking it one step further, ultimately, you want to get down to having these real people say, if you can do X, I will pay Y for it. How can we know what people would be happy to pay for? How can you position your solution in a way that you're solving a problem people are happy to pay for, whether it's convenience, it's whatever. I'll give an example with Mildred. One of the things that we found in the initial research for Mildred was that people were frustrated with MailChimp and all these other solutions because of their support, right? So when they consider a different solution, a lot of them felt trapped with MailChimp and whatever they were using because, yeah, it had the features, right? But they felt trapped because whenever they ran into problems, they would spend so much time trying to get MailChimp to work for them when MailChimp was not designed to work for them. And so a solution that may be cheaper, less feature, less whatever, but they felt they had a voice, they could speak to a support person or they could speak to somebody, and it resulted in them making a change so their product worked for them, was highly, highly important. But here's the thing. Mildred did not hire a customer support person until maybe like a couple months ago. And it's been in existence for like 4 or 5 years. So we had that insight, knew of that insight, discovered that insight. Yet the way we operated, we focused on simplifying, making the UX easy, making this and doing this and making, building all these features. Like, Mildrip is still pretty much in like an MVP stage, but it's a 4-year-old, 5-year-old product. But the moment we added a customer support person, everything changed. And everything changed because one, in the even the ads, our ads performed better just by indicating we had support. But then even for the product development cycle, we were able to get so much insights because people would reach out to us, right? We had like the chat platform that people can reach out. They'll send us a message, but then by the time we hop on, they're gone, right? So but now there was somebody literally dedicated to when somebody reaches out, follow up, get them on an email, get them on a call, talk to them, understand. And we found that our solution was oftentimes for most users 95% there, but it was not working as is for those customers. And usually in the past they would have just left. Now, with the small change, with the small tweak, with small education, with small hopping on a call, we were able to consistently now help them get the product and the solution to work for them. It did not matter how great of an engineering we had or how great of a design team we had. We could not understand the context, the full context that these users were in if we did not have the support team. And it's strange because from a product perspective, we're talking about what differentiates, and we're talking about talking to your customers, and we're talking about problem definition, and we're talking about learning the market, right? What you would normally expect, what you would normally ascribe that to, is having a UX researcher, right? Or having a market research person, right? In this case, we have a UX research person. They've talked to customers multiple times. Hey, usability tests and all this stuff, right? But in our case, the need wasn't simply just, like the UX research and whatever. The need was like truly, connecting to the market, truly understanding why our solution did not work for them. What that means and what that looks like connecting to the market and all that might be different depending on the industry, your solution, your business, but it's and what stage. But you cannot get away from building the insights and building the expertise. There's a direct line between the frustrations, the confusions, the whatever of the market, and the iterations you're making as a product team.
I actually agree with that. I spent about a week speaking with potential customers about the product that we're building, and the mail drip team was one of the teams I spoke with. In that week, I found that sales is the hardest thing to do in product development. I worked on the vast amounts of the prototypes for what we're building. I remember you saying that it's hard because design and engineering sort of have a blueprint, but sales doesn't have a blueprint. To wrap up, I want to say thank you for finding time to join me on the very first episode. Dolapo, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
The one that comes to mind is from my dad. My dad says, "He who pays the piper dictates the tune." The lazy interpretation of that is whoever is paying can dictate what they want. But the way I've often applied it is just going back to like the whole problem definition, whatever thing, right? Like I oftentimes ask myself, who is the piper and who is paying? And that has been a critical part of being able to nail down what the problem is. At my job, one of the things that I try to do is I try to understand who are the people influencing the decision makers, so that in every decision that's being made, I'm oftentimes trying to understand who's making that decision, who's influencing the person making the decision, where is the decision coming from. And the reason that's critical is because if you are building software, if you are building a feature, if you're building, whatever, right? Somebody needs to answer the question, is it done well? Is it done right? And the answer to that is not always straightforward. You can have a solution that users love, but because the person paying the piper does not like it, it has a bad rap or it gets decommissioned. Being able to identify who's the piper, who's paying, because those are critical to know what tune to play or the tune that will be played. So if you apply it to product development, it's like the mail drip example, right? Who are the people that are going to pay for mail drip? The tune then becomes, what are they telling us they're going to pay for? And it's not simply just, like in our case, it's not simply just building great UIs. Like, we've had consistently people told us, your UX is so simple to use, but then they're not paying.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lead Design Build podcast. To get notifications about a new episode, subscribe here or wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Instagram at Lead Design Build. That's Lead Design Build. Until next time, stay productive.